Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show. Mike Tully, man that's kind of been in this business for quite some time, been part of satellite radio, including the very famous Jason Ellis show, which is now available on YouTube, which we'll talk about. You've done some stand up comedy. And of course, you actually started podcasting back in 16, 17, somewhere right around there.
It's funny you mention that because I had to fill out some form for my podcast the other day and I just wrote in, yeah, this podcast is 2 years old. And I'm like, I should probably verify that fact. I actually have no idea how old it is. And I myself was surprised to find out that I believe I've been podcasting for I might be going on 5.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm a veteran.
Um, it's interesting. My wife and I discovered you and Jason and Kevin and the guys on when we bought a new car when we got back from Germany, and just kept it because great to listen to that while traveling and whatnot. But funniest thing about this is my original co-host. He and you sound so similar.
All
Uh,
right.
like like you guys were brothers lost at some point, but he's definitely Mexican and Native American. So
It's really funny because I was going to say, isn't it weird when people sound exactly the same, but they don't look
yeah,
anything
yeah.
alike? I think it's an underratedly disorienting thing for the mind because you
Mhm.
just associate. It's like if like a hamburger smelled like a hot dog, it would fuck you up, you know.
Yes, indeed it would.
And
Indeed it would.
that's kind of what you're talking about here.
Kind of have to do the stereotypical since you're first time guest. I have to ask that whole what got you into the entertainment leading up to, of course, the Jason Ellis show, and of course the after effects of that, and where you guys are kind of at now. In a
So, long story short, getting into it, I'd been in a band with a guy named Brian Cullen, still works at Sirius XM, was a DJ on the Faction channel where the Jason Ellis show started and where I started as a DJ. And he recommended me for a job. And then our boss, Will Pendarvis, was moving to Los Angeles to start the Los Angeles office. So he offered me a full-time job and I didn't have any compelling reason to stay in New York. So I took that and literally directly got off the plane, drove to the studio and walked in, and Jason and Will were doing a thing on air and I hopped on air with them. So I just got into the Ellis show at first in helping in an informal way and then became more and more of my actual job description, particularly when the show went from nighttime to midday during normal like office hours when I
mm,
was there. The show was happening 6 feet away from me. I was going to be a part of it kind of no matter what. And yeah, and then we moved two channels, I don't know how many time slots, 3 different studios, and 15 years, and we had a really big, really awesome, incredible career capping 15th anniversary show lined up. And then they shut the studio like 2 or 3 weeks before that. We were about to record a song for it. I mean, it was a lot going on. And Jason was going to go through flames and then re-sign a contract, and then we're not. And you know, Sirius is I think was already kind of moving in a direction as a company, and then obviously the situation with coronavirus has affected the company as well. I think it's fair to say, and so we are jobless, and I think are very, very fortunate that we live in a media landscape in a world where we don't just go, oh well, that was fun, I'm going to go do construction now. I might still be doing construction 3 months from now, but we have an opportunity to,
mhm.
um, and I sincerely value this a lot. Sirius made the decision that they made, and if I were in their shoes, I might well have made the same decision. But it feels very good to me that they don't get to decide that the show is over, and they don't get to decide that we're done. The people get to decide, and so we continue on into pod world. And win, lose, or draw, I think it's in the long run going to mean a lot to me, at least personally, that nothing got taken away from us. You know,
Yeah.
we continue to do this thing, and I believe it will be successful. And if it's not, nobody's fault but our own. And that's as I say, win, lose, or draw, the way that I would prefer to live my life. So I feel lucky. I honestly feel lucky because that show, we weren't going to be at Sirius for 50 years. It was always going to end at some point. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a so something we've been talking a lot over at LRM. We really focus on movies, but like I said, we're growing and starting to incorporate other things. I'm trying to reach out to some bands, music, and things like but that the way people consume media has really forced a lot of studios to approach the way they distribute media differently, and you can see from the silent film era to the talkies to original broadcast television to cable, satellite streaming to now YouTube and things like that. Radio had its own similar path leading to kind of with the online streaming, but also the podcasting, and you're getting to be a part of that and see it from the inside. What is that like?
Um, well, for one thing, I think people who are on the cutting edge or near the cutting edge of things tend to think, we all kind of think that where we are is probably where everybody else is. And, I think that, streaming TV is obviously the present and the future. But if you offered me a chance to own NBC, I would be pretty excited about that. I think people might be surprised how many people are still just turning on their television and
Mm-hmm.
putting in channel 4 and watching what's on. And I think radio is the same thing. I think there's still quite a lot of people who forget about satellite radio. There's still quite a lot of people that listen to FM radio. There's still people who listen to AM radio, for God's sake. There's people who are just now starting to make money in AM radio. That's an actual thing that can happen. But I think the biggest thing that I can say that I like about this is I've never felt that I had any license to be self-indulgent. I've always assumed that what we were doing, and I probably had a very antiquated, old-timey idea of what we were doing this whole time. I think most people I work with would probably agree that I do, that we were broadcasting. And it was this idea that you're like at a county fair somewhere with a loudspeaker and you have no idea who's going to walk past, but you need to keep the conversation happening in such a way that people just don't go, I don't even know, I'm lost. I don't know what's going on over there. Therefore, I'm not going to give it a try. There's always people leaving the room and entering the room. And not that the Jason Ellis show or me have ever been any good about, refreshing, if you're just tuning in, we're listening to blah, blah, you're talking to blah, blah, blah.
Right.
But I always had a sort of consciousness of that. And then when I started doing my own stuff, I had a real sense that, well, I'm on Faction Talk. Like I'm my next podcast that I'm going to put up is literally with a guy from a think tank in Jerusalem about Israeli-Palestinian peace. And I don't know that I would have felt comfortable having that guy and putting it on Faction Talk because I felt some responsibility to be sort of like the channel. And this is the Opie and Anthony, and now the Jason Ellis and Jim and Sam thing. And now it's not broadcasting, it's narrowcasting. And I like that when we do the Jason Ellis Show free podcast, well, now we're trying to talk to people who don't know us. And so we do an hour and a half like that. And when we do 2 Patreon Jason Ellis shows per week, well, now we're talking to super fans and we know that, so we can hang out and luxuriate. And if one of us wants to get up and go pee, it's like we're free to do that. And when I do my show, it's like, well, if I'm talking about music, I'm just going to assume that you guys give a half a shit about hair metal, or at least know the top 10 bands. Because if it turned you off to hear me mention them, you probably would have stopped listening a long time ago. So, and then the Patreon thing, later on today, I'll just do a podcast where I just answer questions from people, like a straight Q&A thing. I never, ever, 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 ever would have had like the hubris to assume, well, everybody just wants to know everything that's on my mind. It was always like, well, let me talk to them about something, because they don't really care about me. I got to do a thing and make the thing interesting with a little me mixed in. But it feels nice to feel comfortable being a little self-indulgent with super fans, and then a little bit more like this with the other stuff. And as I say, narrow casting, that you can be specific. So that's my biggest observation so far.
I like that. And
Also
that
nice not
whole
having a boss.
that that whole idea of kind of letting go of focusing so much outward and to look inward. I can definitely relate to who that, given my previous career. But you're passionate about everything that you just said, which kind of leads me right into my next question. Is, and I think you pretty much answered it, or at least half of it, with the freedom given to uh, podcasters, streamers, um, things with Patreon and all these things available. Who do you think is benefiting more, creators or consumers, or do you see it as a 100% mutual thing?
Well, I think there's a give and a take. And this isn't a bad example, but Marshall McLuhan said the medium is the message. That there's just like, the classic example of that is like, you don't see, well, there are a fair number of like Tom Clancy books, but generally speaking, novels aren't big action things, because to say, and then he ran and then he jumped and he almost couldn't hold on, but then he did. It's not really that interesting, but you can talk about somebody's internal life really richly. Whereas like film has trouble conveying internal life, is really, really good at action. So if you're somebody who has been writing books this whole time and you're not very good at internal life, but it turns out you've got the secret talent for writing things where cars run into each other and explode, well, then when movies take over, the guy or lady who is really good at the internal life, there'll be less work for her, but there'll be more work for the people who are, so I don't know that there's ever like a less or more. It's just that there are winners and losers as things change. I guess my guiding principle on this stuff is that there used to be a lot of work for people who were lukewarm, likable to millions of people. And there still is. You can still host the Today Show, but the more and more, I'm very fond of whoever said it. The saying that, it used to be, in the future you'll be famous for 15 minutes, and now it's
Right.
you'll be famous for 15 people. And I think that that's like a huge guiding principle for this sort of stuff. Is it used to be, if you did a thing that a small number of people loved but most people didn't like, you were kind of fucked. Like I was a really big fan of Chris Elliott, if that means anything to
Mhm.
you. Like the TV show Get a Life when I was a kid, and I loved it, but it just didn't have. I always loved shows that didn't have the viewership, and so they got canceled. Well, now somebody like that will have this small, relatively small, but incredibly passionate fan base, and so it's great for the fan base that thing doesn't go away and they get served, and it's great for the creator. There's probably less jobs for people who are sort of blandly acceptable to millions and millions of people, and so it changes. And as I say, I don't know if it's better or worse. I think it's just there's winners and losers. I think that's the answer to the creator side of that. For consumers, I think we're in an absolute golden age that's only going to get more golden, because if you want middle of the road shit, they're still making Lifetime movies. But if you want something incredibly specific, you're being served in a way that you couldn't have dreamed of even 10 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh um it's crazy when we finally decided that this year when I was medically retired, you take a pay cut, so you start looking at where you can cut things. And you're like, God, what do I really watch on this TV? Can
Sure.
I get it streaming? This, that, and the other. Um, Looking at that whole idea of winners and losers is something I've brought up about movies. I'm not sure. I know you do follow movies. I know you're big on music. You got Mark McGrath from Sugar Ray on your show, often talking music. Uh, I've pointed out that consumers have gotten almost kind of spoiled with getting a lot of things for free, and we
Mhm.
saw HBO Max offer their 21 slate of movies from Warner Brothers. If you're subscribed, you get the movie same as the theater at no additional cost, and it brought on this discussion of people want these, say, Avengers level movies, but they don't want to pay for it. And when Disney charged people for Milan and everyone rioted, and I'm like, $30, dude, I spend way more than $30 to see a movie. Um,
Mhm.
I I see the evolution and the possibility of creators not maybe making as much, but like you said, it's going to be more focused, more dedicated, maybe even more reliable.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to in some ways I'm a creator and so is Disney, but in
Mm-hmm.
other way more practical ways, we're definitely apples and oranges in terms of the big Hollywood stuff. It's just going
Right.
to find its what the water line level, I think you know what I'm trying to say. It's just going to find itself. Like you can either make money making a $200 million movie between worldwide and Disney Plus or whatever, or you can't. And
Or
if
you
you
can't.
can, they'll continue to make them. And if they can't, they won't. And
Mm-hmm.
there's a reason why there's a lot more $200 million movies, but a lot less $50 million movies because nobody's going to the theater. So again, there's the person who wrote the perfect this generation's 48 hours is fucked because
Yeah.
nobody is funding this generation's 48 hours. But the person, if you're really good at writing Avengers movies, well, there's never been more work. And that's great because if you actually look at the credits, there's usually about 35 credited writers and God knows how many uncredited writers. So there's plenty of people who are getting jobs there. At my level, I think the sea change is, I mean, I'll just use my own personal example. I don't know what calculus SiriusXM had for how many people need to listen to the Jason Ellis show for us to be able to justify paying the Jason Ellis show what the Jason Ellis show is
Mm-hmm.
accustomed to making. But their number's higher than our number is because I have not yet made plans to launch a satellite into space. I don't have a lease in New York or Los Angeles. I don't have an HR department. I don't have a parking lot. I don't have business travel for people to go to the Super Bowl. Like, so the getting in the black becomes a whole hell of a lot easier when you eliminate the middleman.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a massive, that's why people are able to super serve crazy. If you just want to talk about a podcast about the origin story of female Jedis, that's just not viable for Disney to do.
Mm-mm.
It could very well be extremely lucrative for some guy to do. That's
Yep.
the difference.
Indeed. I like that. I do. Since we're kind of, I'm an entertainment site, and I would be remiss if I didn't ask, man, what is it that you're watching or into these days? entertainment? Old, new? What's got your mind?
Old boy, I wish I could go and see like my last few surveys are. I'm really weird. I watch very little television. Honestly, I'm working so much these days, and then the kids finally go to bed. The kids control the television, and then I mean I like basketball, and I've seen about three-quarters of basketball this year. I watch any bad 80s movie that I haven't seen before, any good 80s movie that I somehow missed. I just watched a movie that is it I mean it was a tale of two cities in my own bed because I watched this movie called Starman, which is
Mm,
Jeff Bridges plays an alien, and Karen Allen, who I think might be the most delightful female movie actress of all time. Like I am fucking smitten with
wow.
Indiana Jones's girlfriend. She's
Yes.
incredible. She's so cool, and she was only in like five movies. She's in Groundhog's Day, and but she's in this, and it's. I started off laughing at it, and by the end, I kind of sort of really loved it. And my wife started off laughing at it, and by the end, she was still laughing at it. Um, I guess the story goes they were developing it at the exact same time that ET was getting developed, and ET came out first, and so they had to radically change the plot because it's pretty much if ET was a romance instead of a
Right.
kids
Right.
movie. I mean, I'm telling you, I watched that. I recently watched Superfly. I recently watched Mr. Deeds Goes to Town, which is a movie from the 30s with Gary Cooper.
Is that
Uh,
a sequel to the original Mr. Deeds?
No, see,
No.
I don't get that either, right? Because they're
Okay.
no, I think
Okay.
it came first. Because the Mr. Deeds Goes to Washington is that's well, they're both Capra movies. I should know the answer
Yeah.
to that.
Yeah.
That one is he goes to the government and he's like, "Oh, hold on a second, this whole place is corrupt." And at the end, they're like, "Oh my God, you're right. We have forsaken the republic. Thank you for setting us straight." Um, this is the exact same thing, only with rich people in New York and Gary Cooper instead of Jimmy Stewart. But it was very good. I mean, I'm telling you, I watched that over the course of like 6 nights because that's how much TV I watch. I just watched, yeah, Superfly. I watched Public Enemy by James Cagney with James Cagney that it turned out I had watched 6 weeks earlier and don't even recall having seen. I don't know. Fleabag was very good. That's last year. I watched one other thing that's actually a kind of new. I rewatched the IT Crowd, which is a British series
Yes.
from like
Did you try turning it off and on yet?
I don't know why everybody that should be just as big as The Office. It's incredible. Richard Ayoade is like one of the most amazing TV characters of all time. I don't know why I tell people to watch it and they never get back to me on it, which tells me that they watch an episode and they're like, I don't care. It's incredible.
Yeah,
Harry, it's so good.
you got to give every. I do the 3 episode rule unless
Yeah.
the first one's just like has to be
Yeah.
really atrocious. I
Yeah.
do like the 3 episode rule. I
I also
like.
the
Go
second
ahead.
season was better than the first one, so I think
Yes.
maybe some people the first season is very good. I enjoyed the first season, but I guess I can see where some people are like, I got the idea. But the second season is it's stupid good.
Did you have a previous appreciation for British humor?
Yeah, that definitely helps.
Because that does help.
I also
Definitely.
I realized watching it that as much as I think the world thinks of Irish people as genial and delightful and fun to hang out with, there's really not any examples I can think of like Irish humorists in the culture. I think it might be the tall poppy thing of where like Ireland has one of those cultures where you're not supposed to try to stand out and draw attention to yourself. So maybe they don't really encourage people to
um,
get up on stage and go, "Hey, everybody, look at me. I'm the funny guy." But I'm watching Chris O'Dowd, and as someone who was raised in a very Irish American community, and I was
mhm.
around my sister did Irish dancing. Like I babysat for multiple legitimate Irish families. Like as someone who's pretty plugged into it, I think it appealed to me to have an Irish element to it as well. And then we watched it for like the 10th time, and I was like, wait a second, who's like another funny Irish person in the
Mhm.
culture? Is like Chris O'Dowd like the first one? Who am I not thinking of?
It's I hear you get into so many topics, and that's kind of like I said, part of what inspired me to do this show, and I'm glad to get to talk to you. I've talked to some authors. I'm looking at trying to get some bands and musicians, and of course find ways to tie it in all into entertainment, because almost everything is entertainment
Sure.
today, you
Yeah,
know.
I get that. Yeah.
um I looked around at what was going on with you guys, and of course, uh, there's the professional side of me that was immediately, I wonder what this happened. I wonder about that person on that channel, what their say so. But then the fan in me immediately was like, oh damn, man, I I listen to these guys all the time. I hope they're gonna be okay. And immediately I see you guys start getting help and uh set up, and you'd already had a little bit of infrastructure for yourself.
Yeah. So the Tully Show is the podcast I've been doing for forever, and people can get it wherever they pod. I don't think I'm on Pandora, which is odd. I think I just again, I didn't really used to pay all that much attention. I went
Right.
through, clicked all the boxes, and forgot. Now I'm like, wait, am I there? I probably should be there, which is funny because Pandora is Sirius XM.
Yeah, right.
I don't think I've been there this whole entire time, which just goes to
Fuck.
show you the level of integration and the level of
Communication.
really screwing the bolts that I've had on my side as well. On the Patreon, like it barely matters. I do Tully Time once or twice a week, which is like silly news headlines, because I've always considered that sort of the heart and soul of the Ellis show, or at least what I bring to the table.
Right.
So I like doing that. I started doing, just like I said, a Q&A pod called Rambling Man that I didn't expect to ever do anything like that, but people seem to enjoy that. And then I talk about music a whole bunch. I do the new music releases of the month, and I do bands you might like, which are just bands that I kind of like, that I feel like people either haven't heard of or might be curious about but haven't heard. And I'm also probably next week going to start another new one, which is just called I Heard These Guys Are Good, which is a combination of people send me all the time music suggestions they think I would like, and then I personally have like a 14-page Google Doc of, oh, I heard this is cool. I heard this is cool. So I just figured it might be fun to go through and either go, oh, this is actually good, or let's make fun of these guys. I feel a little weird about doing it with music people have suggested to me, because I think it's usually like they love it and they think I'm going to love it. And I'll feel like a dick if I'm just like, let me tell you why this is the most pathetic thing ever. But I feel like if it's my own suggestion of, I at one point saw something or read something, or my friend texted me or something, and I put it there, well, I can totally make fun of why did I think this was going to be good. So yeah, there's just, basically, if you like what I do, there's many different faces of it on my Patreon, and I'm trying as best I can with the kids home from school these days to crank out as much stuff as I can. And then on the Jason Ellis Show, of course, there's the free Jason Ellis Show podcast and the Jason Ellis Show Patreon, which is a little bit more straightforward in the regard that we're kind of doing like 3 2-hour shows a week. About one of them's free, 2 more is patreon.com/ellismate. And I understand why it's confusing to people, but once you kind of take a deep breath and think about it for a second, it's not really all that crazy.
No. And what I actually like is several of the shows that you're talking about doing are segments I've heard you at least try a couple times on the Jason Ellis Show,
Sure.
where people would send in demos or something, and you guys would judge them and things like that.
Right.
I think that's awesome, man. I enjoy that type of variety. So again, that's great, and I can't suggest enough to everyone to go and check it all out. Jason's story also is a very, very interesting one and worth hearing.
Mine, yeah, for sure.
And your guys' journey, I look forward to continuing to see it.
You and me both.
Thanks so much for being on the show, Mike. Best of luck. And yeah, thanks, dude.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, buddy.
Bye. Have a good one.
Take care.